Tonight, all schools on island will close for an initial period of 1 week, while the Castries Comprehensive Secondary School will be closed for the next 2 weeks after one of its students tests positive for COVID-19. Prime Minister Alan Chastanet warns that he will do whatever it takes to safeguard the country from continued COVID-19 spread, despite any outcry about infringing on personal rights.
And I'm dead serious. I make no apologies for that.
And St. Lucia confirms 2 dengue-related deaths, taking the total thus far to 3, while another death is also under investigation for a possible link to dengue. The details of these stories and much more are coming up.
This is the Hot 7 Nightly News with Lovelace and Amy Joseph.
Good night. It is Friday, the 16th of October, 2020. Welcome to the Hot 7 TV Nightly News. I'm Lovely St. Amy Joseph. Thank you for joining us. A 14-year-old student has been confirmed as St. Lucia's 32nd COVID-19 case. The announcement was made by Chief Medical Officer Dr. Sharon Belmar-George on Friday, the 16th of October. Given that the student was engaged in physical instruction at his school during the time of his diagnosis, health officials have begun contact tracing amongst his teachers and classmates. Jacques Wooding begins our reporting.
Given the circumstances of the island's most recently recorded COVID-19 case, a 14-year-old male who attended the Castries Comprehensive Secondary School, discussions are currently underway with stakeholders from the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Health in regards to the management of the school.
The individual was tested following the diagnosis of his parents and placed in quarantine given his high risk of exposure to the virus. At the time, he had no respiratory signs and symptoms. Upon receiving his results, he was transferred to the respiratory hospital for care. This case will continue the current efforts of the ministry's contact tracing team, which had commenced with the diagnosis of the cases, his parents, COVID-19 case 30 and 31.
Health officials note that the circumstances of this case may result in some anxiety among staff, students, parents, and members of the public associated with the affected educational institution, and has confirmed that no stone will be left unturned in the management of this case.
The Ministry of Health and Wellness, we assure all that no effort shall be spared to ensure the health and safety of all, and this remains a priority of the Ministry of Health in efforts to manage this case and others which have recently been diagnosed. Every individual is reminded that the guidelines for preventing exposure to COVID-19 can reduce the spread of infection.
This case brings the COVID-19 count in St. Lucia to 32 cases and is said to have indications of community spread. Members of the public are urged to continue to follow strict COVID-19 protocols by wearing their mask and practicing social distancing, only venturing into the public domain if necessary. Jacques Wooding, Hot 7 News.
Prime Minister Alan Chastanet made passionate and, to some, inflammatory statements during Friday's NEMAC meeting regarding the lengths that he will go to make certain that the country gets the COVID-19 pandemic under control. He made it clear that he will act without hesitation or apology if people refuse to heed advice from health officials and continue to flout COVID-19 protocols. He says he will not allow the situation to get to the stage where a national shutdown will be required.
If in fact that we have to become more draconian in imposing the protocols we have, we will do it. I am not going to be intimidated by anyone to suggest that we're taking away persons' individual rights in this country. Everybody has a right in this country, and the majority speaks. And those rules are there. We can either agree to do it voluntarily, or we will impose the letter of the law on those people who are refusing to adhere. Because this is for the safety, not only health-wise, but economically for this country. And I'm dead serious. I make no apologies for that.
He was adamant that no amount of public outcry will sway him when it comes to taking decisive action to safeguard lives and also the country's economic survival.
Every day you go out, think of somebody who you love, keep that person in your mind, put your mask on. Bounce. No hugging. And just do your part. If everybody does their part, that's all we need. Everybody do their part. We do not want to get to a point that we have to close down. I don't even want to begin to envision what that would be. Okay, that needs to be taken out of our minds.
The Prime Minister says the aim is not to oppress anyone, but to protect lives and livelihoods. He calls for the cooperation of every St. Lucian to do the right thing amidst this pandemic. Minister for Education, Dr. Gail Rigobert, has announced that all schools on island will close for an initial 1-week period. Meanwhile, the school that the latest COVID-19 patient attended will be closed for the next 2 weeks. Dr. Rigobert has outlined the way forward for the instruction of the country's students, given that already they had to undergo a prolonged period away from their classrooms. Jacques Wooding has more.
In response to public concern for the safety of students, after a 14-year-old boy in attendance at a local secondary school tested positive for COVID-19, the Ministry of Education has moved to cease all classroom instruction for an initial period of 1 week. The announcement was made by Minister for Education Dr. Gail Rigobert ahead of the Friday, October 16th sitting of the National Emergency Management Committee.
With respect to recent developments at the Castries Comprehensive School, we have been well advised that in the first instance, we should keep the Castries Comprehensive Secondary School closed for the next 2 weeks, while the other schools on the island, we will keep closed for a week or two as well, Prime Minister? 1 week in the first instance.
Dr. Rigobert believes that recent developments have been a good test for the protocols currently utilized in schools around the island. She disclosed that stakeholders remain in discussion for a possible revision of the current education model.
What we have discovered over the last couple days in particular is that the protocols that we had established initially have worked to a certain extent, and that recent developments have proven to be a good stress test of what we had in place, which is why this morning another meeting was convened with stakeholders such as the union, the management of the Ministry of Education, National Principals Association, district education officers, and other partners to fine-tune existing protocols.
The Education Minister unveils that a contingency plan is currently in the works to ensure that students can smoothly transition between varied models of instruction when necessary.
Ensure that we have an education continuity plan. So, for example, now that there is no school today, what do students do? If we are to close schools for a week or two, that there would be little to no disruption to their instruction or their learning experience. And of course, you'll recall that during the lockdown, we had already initiated mixed modalities of learning, both traditional, for example, and online learning.
She is urging parents to remain calm as the ministry does not anticipate any major impact to the instruction process during this period. Jacques Wooding, Hot 7 News.
Chief Medical Officer Dr. Sharon Belmar-George announced tougher COVID-19 measures to mitigate the spread of the virus as recent cases point to community spread. The announcements came at a special meeting of the National Emergency Management Advisory Committee, NEMAC, on Friday. Prior to the NEMAC meeting, the Cabinet of Ministers met to discuss St. Lucia's current situation regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. Genevieve Gonzaga reports on the new and more stringent measures announced by the CMO.
The last 4 cases of COVID-19 in St. Lucia presented a different scenario for health officials, the possibility of community spread. On Friday, following the announcement of COVID-19 case 32, an emergency NEMAC meeting was held and more stringent protocols were announced by Chief Medical Officer Dr. Sharon Belmar-George. The CMO announced that all mass crowd events should be reduced.
We are presently at 500 persons. The decision to reduce mass crowd activities to limit it to 100 as we monitor and manage the situation on the ground. All sectors with the phased reopening of the economy presented plans, COVID-19 safety plans to allow the safe reopening of their organizations.
Furthermore, the CMO made the announcement that public boat rides are banned. She stated that there has been a great level of complacency at all social gatherings.
We noted over the last few weeks a level of complacency and non-adherence to those. There will be strict enforcement of protocols, from community markets to nightclubs to dances to beach parties to weddings, funerals, church activities. And boat rides will be limited to family excursions only, taking out the public boat rides which pose a risk to us. So all of those activities will be strictly enforced per protocols or run the risk of losing their licensing or being closed within very short measures.
She also warns that there will be beefed up enforcement of protocols.
For the enforcement of social distancing and PPE protocols in public places. For us to be able to live safely with PPE, we have to live like everybody else has COVID-19. And with these protocols, even though we have persons who are positive, if we use them effectively, it would significantly reduce the possibility of transmission to other persons and transmission into the communities. So that is increased enforcement we would need by the Royal St. Lucia Police Force, the support of our community leaders, and a bipartisan approach to health and safety within the communities, the mandatory enforcement of the face mask use in public areas.
Health officials stress that for a successful fight against COVID-19, the cooperation of the public as well as the complete adherence to all protocol and regulation is required. Reporting for Hot 7 News, I am Genevieve Gonzalez.
Thank you, Genevieve. It has been disclosed by the Minister for Health, Mary Isaac, that officials are having difficulty with the contact tracing process in relation to COVID case number 29, a bus driver. She says the individual has chosen to withhold necessary information, hindering the progress of investigations.
The contact tracing process for COVID-19 case number 29 is proving very challenging for local health authorities. As told by Minister for Health Mary Isaac, this individual, who tested positive for COVID-19 on 2 separate occasions, has now taken a vow of silence on any information as to his whereabouts and interactions during the weeks preceding him being tested.
And right now, we have a situation where we are not even able to figure out where the contamination came through. We have someone who is ill, who reported sick to our hospital, was tested and presented with COVID-19. Yet this person is refusing to cooperate with the authorities at the Ministry of Health, refusing to give us information that may save the lives of many St. Lucians.
Isaac laments that the man in question is only one of hundreds in the population who have developed ulterior beliefs as to the reality of the COVID-19 situation in St. Lucia. She believes that the advent of community spread has been a direct result of the flaunting of protocols by these individuals.
When we have people who recklessly go around and not following the protocols that the Ministry of Health has set, and you can see the fallout of that. We are talking about just 4 additional cases, and we have had to shut down schools and some other institutions. Some ministries have now shut down. We have some students and teachers who actually had to sleep in a school last night. And look at all the implications of what is happening when we disregard simple protocols.
The minister went on to scold a local talk show host for allowing the man a platform to share misinformation with the public as to his COVID-19 status and the details of his journey into state quarantine. Isaac has made a plea to the entire population to look beyond politics and speculation and to make decisions in the best interest of themselves, their families, and the wider population of St. Lucia. Jacques Wooding, Hot 7 News.
The Ministry of Health has received results from the Caribbean Public Health Agency confirming 2 dengue-related deaths in St. Lucia. It means that the island has now recorded 3 dengue-related deaths, while another is under investigation. National epidemiologist Dr. Michel Fassois revealed the 2 confirmed cases were individuals who were seen and managed at the Owen King EU Hospital, where they presented with a clinical picture consistent with dengue fever.
This now brings the total number of confirmed dengue-related deaths in St. Lucia to 3. A 4th death is currently being investigated. The individual was admitted to hospital with signs and symptoms of dengue fever. As per protocol, a sample was tested locally and sent to CARFA for confirmation. The Ministry of Health and Wellness awaits these results.
As of the 10th of October, a total of 711 confirmed cases of dengue fever have been recorded. The northern part of the island continues to report the highest number of cases, although cases have been reported throughout the island. This is the Hot 7 TV Nightly News. Still to come, the Prime Minister confirms he was a person of interest for contact tracing relating to the Castries Comprehensive student after he attended an event at the school. Julian Monroe's on teacher and student safety concerns amid the unfolding COVID crisis. And we speak with the Chief Education Officer following another intense round of discussions with education stakeholders on Friday. That and more coming up after the break.